We're Mark and Cheryl Hopkins, and Chad asked us to do a video response to the sermon. Why are you looking at me?
Because I like you.
Asked us to do a video response to his sermon last week. And so here's my response. Chad asked us to write down a list of priorities, the things that we that come forefront in our life. And I wanted to cheat a little bit because there were some things that are a priority in my life that I really wanted to have them be spiritual, but they're not spiritual necessarily in themselves. However, they are part of my spiritual walk. I don't know.
Your routine?
My routine, spiritual routine. Anyway, and so he had us write down a list of our priorities in our life. So as I was beginning to write, I wanted to cheat a little bit and write things that I knew were more godly and more, I don't know, like things that maybe weren't completely honest in reality, just because that's what I thought I should do. But I chose the narrow path, and I decided to write down things that that came to my mind first thing. And as I reviewed them after, we were asked to then write down some other things. And as I reviewed them after, I realized that a good portion of them had to do with me and my time and selfishness, what I thought was selfish. Things like a priority for me is setting time apart for myself, just whether that's going to the gym or whether that's time alone with some coffee, or it doesn't happen a lot, but it's what I first think of. It's kind of my priority. I do get up in the morning and spend time with Jesus, and yet that kind of was not my first thought. It was maybe my second or third thought, and time just by myself was my first thought. So I've been wrestling a little bit with that this week. Like, is that selfish? Is that necessary for my sanity? And I haven't quite come to a conclusion yet.
If you hear strange things in the background, we have our dog in our basement, and he's not exactly the biggest fan of the basement. So thanks, Livy, for being the dog whisperer. It was interesting. What really went through my mind was, how bad do I want it? And I'll explain. So I was scrolling through some old notes, just things I had written down. I was looking at some old prayer requests and things like that. And I came across a picture that I had wrote. It was a sticky note called and it just basically said, you have the perfect amount of time each day to do the things that matter most. The trick is figuring out what matters most. And how timely that and I wrote that probably 6 years ago. And, we're in the midst of this series about essentially going back to what matters most. And then does our life and the rhythm of our life reflect that? And so as I was thinking about that, that means that in order to say yes to the things that matter most and make the space and the time for it, we may have to say, probably, you're going to have to say no to things that, we've already got in progress or have just committed to in some respects or in some way. And so that's the hard part, is to say, okay, what matters most? Now, what am I going to do about it? And how bad do I want it? Is it really worth it to me? Does it really matter? Or do I just give that mental assent to it? So what I'm praying for me and for really all of us at MCC and frankly the church at large, is to commit to what matters most. And that takes, if we don't feel that commitment, I'm praying that we literally, that God would stir up that hunger in us, that sense of desperation to say, this matters most, and I have to go after it. So if you're not there, what my prayer is for you and for me is that we have that hunger stirred up, that we have that recognition, and that we're willing to then take the action, whether or not that disappoints people who may think differently about what matters most. If that happens, that happens. How they feel about that is really not our responsibility, but if we say no to people, we need to do it with grace and love, but be firm, because if it matters most, it's worth it. So that's my where I am right now in the process of that, going through this together with Cheryl, and that's my prayer for you. Any final words? Take that as a no. We love you. Bye.